Hello everybody and welcome back for the second part of the symposium. Now delighted to welcome onto the stage Grégory Castéra and Matthys.
I'm serving some water. Curator serving water to the artist. No, we will share it later. Okay. So thank you, Daphne, Natasha, team of Witte de With, and also the Mondrian Fund for this invitation to the program. Before performing our contribution, I would like to share a few thoughts that I wrote as an answer to the project and also to the things that we listened to in the two different conversation before. I have to say that it's very interesting to see how the artists and curator are talking together. The way the four of you were talking together are very, very different. And you will see also here that it will be also very different because I will read a text and Kobe will also read and comment something. Maybe it tells something about the way we work. And I realized that I sent the wrong biography. It's an old one that I was connected with my work in 2012. It's okay, I think. But what has changed? Well, the first thing that changed is that now I'm running a project called Council, and I think we will talk about it later. And the other thing that changed is now, in most of the time, the beginning of the bio is Grégory Castéra is a curator. And but I have to say it's a very strange. The problem I have with this thing is that even if people know that I'm a curator, even my closest friend, and even if they are working within the art, they continue asking me what I am doing. And I think the problem is that I made only a few exhibitions and few publications, and I mostly make what we call project, and project with undefined format, and in which I combine the position of a dramaturge, editor, a producer, and even sometimes I have a kind of position of an artist in the work. But I still consider it as a curating practice. I'm not working from an ideal collection I have in my mind. I'm also not working with artists that I like or people that I admire. My starting point is always an issue. So what is an issue? The philosopher Bruno Latour says that rare now are topics where you do not see scientists publicly disagreeing among themselves on what they are, how they should be studied, financed, portrayed, distributed, understood, or cast. In other words, what we call facts have become issues. And the more important the issue is, the less certain we are now how to handle it. To give an example, my contribution today to the talk is performed with Matthys, alias as Agency, who has been working since many years on intellectual property. The modern concept of intellectual property relies fundamentally upon the assumption of a division between the ontological categories of nature and culture. However, such a distinction is difficult to make, and now there are more and more examples. Maybe some of you heard about the nature's right or the animal's right that are completely blurring these boundaries, and it also happened in many art practices. And so, agency, that the name of the work, and the agency constitutes a growing list of things that resist to this split. So, I usually start a project with facts that become, or are becoming, or could become an issue. Why do issues need art? I think issues need art because they are not fixed. Issues are, they involve an experimentation. They involve an experimentation in their artistic and their political representation. So I am working about issue with artistic research and artistic experimentation. Another question we can ask is, what are we experimenting when we work about or with an issue? And I think we experiment the way to be attached to this issue. So attachment is not a simple interest for something. Attachment is about being transformed by something. And I think from my perspective, curating is a certain practice of attachment. I think curators should talk more about project from this perspective. How does a project transform our practice? Did it transform in a good way? I have been working with Kobe for almost 2.5 years when I was running a place called Le Laboratoire d'Aubervilliers. It was 2.5 years of work to prepare 3 events that Kobe is calling assembly. And I have to say that it transformed so deeply my work that I decided to create an institution. And so I created this institution with woman Sandra Terjman, who is running a foundation called Cadistar Foundation. And so this institution is called Council, and it directly derives from the way agency and other projects are making assemblies. So many beings did and do the similar experimentation of attachment for the same issue. And I use the word being because it's not only about the diversity of humanity and the diversity of form of knowledge. An issue is an issue because it affects a collective of being. My practice of curating is about composing with the different attachment. It is about staging the radical alterity involved within this public. It is about testing different representation for this issue. And it is also about failing, because it's hard work. So I think this gives an answer about some question about instrumentalization of artist community by curatorial project with relation to control that were addressed before. And this is why I made just a few exhibitions, because, and this could be a statement for me, the form of an art project and ideally the form of an art institution should derive from the practice. In the 17th century, the philosopher Giambattista Vico said it with other words. He was, so he's a philosopher who had great problem with Descartes. And the way he which is related to what I just said before, but he said it from perspective of science. Method has to take its form from its object itself. Method doesn't only have to adapt the object to its way to build and see things, but it has to derive its way to do from the nature of the object. So today, our contribution to this event will be done with agency's specific words, rhythm, and tone. We will invoke the thing 863, Musée National de l'Automobile, so National Museum of Car. It's a controversy that concerns a conflict between Consorts Schlumpf and the Association of the National Museum of Car from Mulhouse about the collection of Fritz and Hans Schlumpf, which was brought to the Court of Appeal in Paris in 1988. So, in court, the judge had to decide if the exhibited car collection compiled by Fritz and Hans Schlumpf could receive the legal protection as a work of art. And I think you will, the more we will go in the case, the more you will understand how it relates to this. And so I will share the text. We don't have enough text, so you can read the 2 or 3 of you, and I give the floor to Kobe.
Good afternoon. I will invoke this story. I hope it resonates somehow with the discussion that was happening. As it's not an easy text, I asked them also to distribute some copies for those who want. But I will try to read it as best as I can. So I'm gonna introduce you this controversy. In 1961, Fritz Schlumpf, one of the two directors of HKC, which is a textile factory in Mulhouse in France, which is near to the Swiss border in Alsace, secretly began buying a large number of classic cars. Could we have the image actually? Very good.
We decided not to talk about food.
Yeah, this one, yeah. Yeah. So he was first like a collector, and from 1966 onwards, he prepared a museum for the car collection inside one of the warehouses of the factory. But he did that in a secret way, that the workers were not knowing about that. He was using company funds, and he employed 7 mechanics, which were all enrolled on the same company or the factory. 7 mechanics, 2 upholsterers, 3 body workers, and 5 painters to restore all the old cars. The collection included more than 500 vehicles, the most important of which were a selection of Bugatti cars. Fritz Schlumpf invested around 12 million French francs at the time into purchasing and exhibiting this collection. He would often go see car races, and then after the race he would buy the cars off. And in 1976 he was almost finished with the museum, and he kind of made a board called Museum Schlumpf. But on June 28, 1976, at one point the employees of HKC textile factory, who was at the time in the crisis, economical crisis, went on strike because their wages hadn't been paid for 6 months. And the Schlumpf brothers, they tried to sell the factory with all the debts, but they didn't succeed, so they flew to Switzerland. And then 2,000 workers were laid off without any pay. So there was a long period of legal procedures that were followed between the Schlumpf brothers in Switzerland, and then mostly the workers. By the end of 1976, the factory was closed and sealed, and in March 7th, 1977, the unions occupied the factory, claiming the unpaid wages for the workers. And it was one of the union members that discovered this hidden Schlumpf museum, which hadn't been opened yet to the public. And they made it actually accessible for visitors, but they changed the name. They kind of renamed the Schlumpf Museum as le Musée des Travailleurs, the Workers' Museum. There was no entrance fee, but at the end of the exhibition they asked a donation in order to pay the wages of the workers. And also the workers actually had changed the cards next to the cars, saying like, this car cost so much, my wage was so much. So it was, I mean, they respected very much the collection, but it did really turn it into a workers' museum. In 1978, the French Council of State classified the collection as a historical monument. And this prevented in the bankruptcy that the cars could be sold separately and would actually leave the French territory. So all of a sudden, Mr. Schlumpf's collection was declared as a patrimoine, as they say in French. And the Association for the National Museum of the Motor Car was founded by the state, regional, and local city authorities. In 1979, the court ordered the liquidation of the Schlumpf brothers' personal assets, including the collection of classic cars. And so in 1982, the cars were sold by the administrative people appointed for the sale of the possession of their properties, and it was sold to the National Museum of the Motor Car. And then in July 10, 1982, the museum was opened, and it's called Musée National de l'Automobile, which is the French national museum. And the Schlumpf collection was kind of distributed among many other cars. It was like the first French national car museum. Following this, Schlumpf claimed a right of attribution for their car collection. So they kind of lost the physical ownership over the car collection, but they still wanted it that they would be recognized that it's their collection that was at the basis of the National Museum. So they started a legal procedure on the basis of les droits d'auteur. So they kind of declared the car collection as a work of art. And on November 25th, 1986, the court case Consortium Schlumpf against the Association du Musée National de l'Automobile de Mulhouse took place at the Tribunal de Grande Instance de Paris. And they declared that the collection of automobiles plus the museum they created for this collection was, and I quote from the first judgment, the car collection was an inseparable whole which needs to be considered as a true original creation of the mind, just like a work of art, and as such deserves the protection given by the provisions of Act of March 11th, 1957, which is the law, the copyright law, or the droit d'auteur, as they call it in French. So the court concluded that their collection should be referred to as the Schlumpf Museum. The Musée National de l'Automobile appealed to the decision. Of course, also they didn't wanted to kind of reconfigure the entire National Museum in order to bring back the collection as one piece or work of art, which would destroy their whole setup that they actually had developed. So they went in appeal, and on the May 25th, 88, there was another trial in the Cour d'appel in Paris, and there the judgment was done by a judge called Dre in French. And I will be reading some fragments from that case. Considering that, on the one hand, the attribution of a name or a specific description on a label on the outside of an object or an institution constitutes an expression which belongs to one who exercises an ownership right or an exclusive right of control over this object or institution. Considering that Musée National de l'Automobile de Mulhouse justifies itself that they bought the entire collection of cars from the indebted workers of Hans and Fritz Schlumpf, that this sale, which happened in presence of a notary, the syndicate's administrators who were juridically assigned, must be held for valid today. Since then, all actions undertaken by the brothers Schlumpf in order to cancel that sale, including, for example, the action before the European Commission of Human Rights, were rejected or declared not valid. They really tried everything to get it back, it looks like. Considering that in this state, the privilege granted to the Musée National de l'Automobile de Mulhouse in the exercise of their own right as owners allows them to oppose themselves, in principle, to all labeling or identification of what is their thing. Considering, on the other hand, that if the action of gathering mobile objects at a particular place is inspired by a long asserted and undisputed desire or a passion, it approaches the condition of being a work of the mind. It remains, however, that this work of the mind cannot be recognized under the legal protection established by the Act of March 1157, which is the copyright law, or the droit d'auteur, as they say, whereby the work of art is not to bear any manipulation or modification after its creation. On the contrary, the modern conception of museology implies the necessary developments and presentations in order to retain the interests and attention of visitors, qualified or not. Considering that in the state it was by wrong way that the first judges thought to impose, by the Musée National de l'Automobile de Mulhouse, unwanted labeling or naming, that authority has to be deducted, of what happened before. The action of collecting and the passion which inspired the authors constituted and continues to constitute a message and a witnessing. This creative initiative deserves protection as an expression of a right of personhood, which is a neighbor of moral rights. As the court could experience during its visit to the museum, this was an uncommon action for the collectors, from the collectors. Considering that from the site visit and the discussions which followed, it resulted that the work of Fritz and Hans Schlumpf, which was born of their initiative and their stated desire, must deserve in itself the necessary juridical protection inherent to work of human, which bears witness to a specific time or of creative genius, that this protection must be ensured in the manner determined now in the provisions of this judgment, and according to the terms that may still be adjusted by means of mediation in order to bring the parties closer and, if possible, their reconciliation. Accordingly, Hans and Fritz Schlumpf are entitled to the protection of the work made by them under the name Schlumpf Collection, that this name should appear in bold on all flyers, brochures, printed works relating to the National Automotive Museum, and all souvenirs and postcards produced or edited by the Appellants Association. That the party's National Automotive Museum, located on the right as you enter, will be exclusively dedicated to the memory of the Schlumpf brothers' mother and maintained in the state they wanted it, without the addition of any vehicles or objects that have not received their prior approval. If you go to the museum today, you can find this room. It includes his first collected car, which was when he was a child. He had a kind of received from his mother a small Bugatti car with I don't know, like you pedal with pedals, and that was for him the first part of his collection. And so the museum was forced to reinstall that car as part of respecting his collection. And behind it hangs a huge portrait of the mother. So where was I? That the court can be called upon again by either party by act or admitted as a solicitor by a joint request when any difficulty arises in the execution of the foregoing provisions, and that the court can, especially if the parties agrees, proceed through mediation to develop a more accurate and better adaptation of the situation acknowledged by the Schlumpf brothers for the protection and development of the collection that bears their name. So just to wrap up, so in 1989, following the orders from the Paris Appeal Court, the Musée National de l'Automobile was forced to add the Schlumpf collection to its name and to all the documents mentioning parts of the collection, including the catalogs. And additionally, almost nothing could be changed